Hello everyone, it's Elaine. Thank you for joining me here today on my YouTube channel. I'm sorry I've had quite a long break. Life has just got in the way recently, but for today's card I am starting off with a slightly larger than A2 sized piece of cardstock, and I'm blending on some Twisted Citron and Evergreen Bow Distress ink. I'm using these little makeup blending brushes again. I really like using them, and the colour goes on really lightly and you can just gradually build up the colour without getting too much blotchiness. And I'm just putting it in random places. This is going to form my jungle themed background. It's going to be quite subtle. So I've got a bit of a light layer on that cardstock. I then take this Newton's Nook Tropical Leaves stencil and I'm going to go back over those areas with exactly the same distress inks. I don't press too hard. I just want a light, subtle design on my card front. So I'm using two separate blending brushes here, just to make things easier and nice and quick. I don't have to keep cleaning off the brushes. Just adding a bit more texture here by smushing on the ink pad onto my glass mat, watering it down with a little bit of water and a paintbrush, and just splattering on the inks through that stencil. So it will just be the leaves that have this sort of splatter effect on them. I take these Gansai Tambi watercolour paints and I'm using the green one out of that palette. These are the pearl colours, and again just splatter a little bit of that on as well. And they're just going to set that aside to dry. And once it's dry, I'm using A2 sized rectangle die here. This one I believe is Waffle Flower Lacy Layers, the largest rectangle in that set. And there you can see I've cut this white rectangle piece of cardstock from the Lawn Fawn stitched rectangles. This is the second largest die in that set, and I'm using this to help me create a sliding window panel. I really love making these interactive cards, and I often use the Sunny Studio Stamp sliding window die, but I'm aware that maybe some of you haven't got that die or are new to interactive cards, and before you wanted to make a purchase, you wanted to see whether interactive cards are for you. So I would do a DIY version. So I've got some markings on that white piece of cardstock there, and I'll come to that in a moment. But just for now, I'm using my craft knife and a steel-edged ruler, and I'm cutting along 3 sides of that template. Just taking things slow, not rushing, and here you can see I've got my sliding window flap there. Now I've got this Fiskars scoreboard and I've got this little scoring tool on here. So along that top edge, which we didn't cut, I'm going to score. And now I'm going to move my cardstock down, and this is where those measurements come in handy that you saw on my template. It doesn't matter what size rectangle you use for your flap, but you want to make sure that it leaves enough edging for you to be able to adhere your card panel to your card base. And you want to score along the bottom. I've used about 1/4 of an inch there. And then the next 2 panels where you score along the middle, these need to be the same size, because when you pour your sliding window up, you want it to pour evenly and smoothly, and you don't want any buckling. I have popped a picture onto my blog, which probably will show visually a much better description of what I'm trying to say. And I'm just using that scoring board to make all my score lines. If you've got an actual scoring board, that would work as well, but I haven't got one of those, so I just use my little scoring tool on my Fiskars trimmer. But as I'm sort of bending my score lines, you'll see how it's coming together. So you can see those 2 rectangles, the 2 bigger ones, they need to be the same size, and then you'll have your smaller flap or your smaller scored line. And this is where you're going to secure your pull tab mechanism. So just popping some 1/4 of an inch double-sided adhesive along that area along that little 1/4 inch scored tab. And this is my notch. I decided to use this semicircle die. It's from the MFT Tag Builder Blueprint 6 die set, I believe. And I'm going to use this to create my notch for my pull tab opening. So just securing that with some tape there. Just measured the middle part and use that little hole to make sure everything's lined up centrally. And run through that through my die cut machine. I've got my A2 size card base there, and I'm just lining everything up, and I'm going to just slot that die back on top, because on that front piece of my card base I want to cut another notch, and I need everything to line up perfectly. So make sure you open out your card base. You don't want to cut through both layers, and everything lines up perfectly. So now I'm going to remove that double-sided adhesive, and I've got another piece of cardstock here which I'm going to lay on top of that double-sided adhesive. It's slightly wider than my opening, my sliding window opening, but not too wide that I'm not going to be able to adhere anything along those edges. Just using my embossing buddy here just to take away any stickiness. I don't want anything getting stuck as I pull my slider tab. So just to show you it's coming together. If your pull tab overhangs the top of the card base, you can always trim that down. Again, using my embossing buddy here just to make sure that everything's running smoothly. This is my card base. I've just taken some post-it tape and just masked off the edges. And I'm going back in with the Evergreen Bow and Twisted Citron Distress inks. And this is going to be where my hidden message panel, but I'm going to make it into a shaker today, which is different to ones I've made in the past. So just blending on those inks, and this is going to be where my little surprise message is as well. So slightly dark around the edges with that Evergreen Bow, and just lightly building up the colour so that everything sort of blends in nicely. Popping this into my mini Misty because I'm going to stamp my sentiment using that top panel just to help me get my placement right. Haven't stuck anything down yet. And the sentiment I'm using is from the Hello Bluebird Jungle Little stamp set. And that's the stamp set I'm going to be using for today's card. I'm using my VersaFine Onyx Black ink to stamp out that sentiment. And I've got this Hero Arts ombre ink pad here. Just to add a little bit of interest, I've taken some of the leaf images in that stamp set. You're not really going to see a lot of these. I'm going to be covering most of it up with sequins. So now I've made some custom DIY foam strips. I've just used foam tape, and I've put it down onto some release paper from some label paper, and then I just cut my strips with a craft knife, and I just find this works really well when I need thin strips of foam tape. I really don't like using scissors to cut foam tape lengthways. I find it just makes my scissors really sticky, and I get, especially on camera, I get in a right old pickle. So now I'm just making sure that I'm getting this foam tape down on my card in a rectangle shape. I do make sure that the foam tape goes below that notch because I need to make sure that that is clear for my sliding mechanism. And just popping a little bit more foam tape at the top around that notch, just so that everything is flush and there's going to be no dipping of my top panel once I put it down onto the card. So I did decide just to add a little bit more interest to that background. I popped a bit of release paper left over onto that sentiment so it didn't get covered up. And I'm just doing a few more ink splatters. I used some Copic Opaque White and again that Hero Arts ink pad. Just using some water to water it down. Use my tweezers. And then once that had dried, I did go in my embossing buddy again and went all around the edges of that foam tape. And here I've popped my sequin mix. Probably did go a little bit too mad with the sequins. Got some gold hexagons there from Nuvo, some Nuvo confetti. I'll list the sequin mix down below. I know it's Crafting Desert Divas, but I can't remember exactly. I think it's Skyfall, but I'll list it down in the description box below. And now I'm removing the release paper, but only along this top edge. I'm only releasing it from the lower part of those foam tape pieces, because I don't want to remove the release paper from those very top ones, because that's going to be where our sliding mechanism is and we don't want anything to get stuck. So cut a piece of acetate to size, just securing that down, really pushing that down so that my sequins are really secure in there. Give it a quick shake. Just about see my sentiment. You can see I did go a bit crazy with those sequins and embellishments. And again, taking my embossing buddy, really making sure that all the stickiness has gone. It's really important to make sure that it's not sticky at all, otherwise our sliding pull tab will not work. So on top of that acetate, I'm now using some 1/8 of an inch double-sided adhesive, because we're now going to secure our card front on top of this card base. So just remove that release paper from the top. Grab the panel. Get everything lined up nicely and press down firmly. And everything seems to be working as it should. Again, taking my embossing buddy, helping everything to run up and down smoothly. Now off camera, I took the Hello Bluebird Happy Birthday die. I cut that out for some black cardstock. And I'm just using that negative piece to help get everything back in evenly spaced and straight, using my quick stick tool here and some glue pen. Just hold that down for a second, press down with my acrylic block, and then slowly lift up that negative piece. Now I didn't do any colouring on camera today, but I have listed the colours I've used for this little monkey in the description box below and also on my blog. I just wanted him to be hooked over this birthday, so I'm just using my reverse tweezers just to hold that in place with some glue. And then you want to make sure, if you wanted to do a card like mine where the sentiment is going to pop up, just pop your glue on the bottom half of the sentiment. If you pop it on the top and stick it down, when you go to pull your pull tab, it won't pop up. Just adding some more glue to my little monkey there, making sure everything's going to be nicely secure. And once everything's just how I want it, I can press down. Pop in that little eye on the birthday. I always seem to lose those, but I was pleasantly surprised when I didn't lose any of these bits on this card. I'm adding some Spectrum Noir clear sparkle pen over the black of the sentiment, adding some white gel highlights to my little monkey, some black glaze gel pen to the eyes and nose. And then I also cut this arrow, which is from the same die set as the notch. And rather than stamp pull here, I'm just going to use this little arrow to indicate that people need to pull up. Just using my Gina K Connect glue. I find that you don't have to wait too long for things to hold. I really like using it. And these are some jewels, just to add a little bit of sparkle to the front of the card. I believe these are Spring Green from Pretty Print Posh. I will have them listed down in the description box as well. And finally, I did add this little present. This is from Mama Elephant Page Huggers. I thought it was the perfect size. And again, just use my Copic markers to colour that in and securing that down with the Gina K Connect glue. Once that black glazed gel pen was dry, I added a couple more highlights. You can just about see that there. And you can see the sparkle on the sentiment. And there's my hidden shaker panel and DIY sliding window card. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want more information and a list of all the products I've used in today's video, please head over to the description box and you'll find my coordinating blog post there. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.